This is why I'm anxious is only the beginning. I'm anxious tells you what you're feeling, but it doesn't always tell you what you're afraid will happen. Knowing why you learned something does not always make your body stop expecting it. You can sit there saying, I know I'm allowed to speak up, where there's another part of you saying, yeah, but what will it cost us? Once you can see that, you now have choices that you didn't have access to before. Hello, welcome back. Or if you're new here, hi, hello, welcome, take a seat. I'm so glad that you stumbled upon this little corner of the internet. Today, I want to talk about anxiety, but more specifically, I want to talk about how saying I'm anxious is sometimes only the beginning of understanding what is actually happening. And I want to start by saying that I'm anxious is useful information. It matters that you notice when you feel anxious. It matters that you can recognize the tightness in your chest, the thoughts that won't slow down, that sudden urge to fix something, the feeling that, something just can't quite settle. I actually think that we have become much better at recognizing anxiety. We know what overthinking looks like. We know what spiraling looks like. We know what it feels like when our nervous system is activated. We have words for things that we may not have had words for, 10 years ago. And I think that is really important. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I also want to acknowledge that sometimes we recognize anxiety and then we stop there, where we say, I'm anxious about this conversation. I'm anxious because they haven't texted me back. I'm anxious about posting this. I'm anxious about going to this event. I'm anxious about making this decision. And again, all of these are true, but it doesn't necessarily tell us the whole story, because I'm anxious tells you what you're feeling, but it doesn't always tell you what you're afraid will happen. And that is the conversation that I want to have today, because in my world, when anxiety shows up, I want to know what your mind and your body believe is at risk. I want to know what this moment seems to mean for you. I want to know what ending your mind is already preparing for, because that is usually where we start to understand why this particular moment is creating so much anxiety, what it's stirring up in you, and why. So, let's say that you need to speak to your mom about something. Maybe she made a comment that bothered you. Maybe she keeps doing something that you've asked her not to do. Maybe she expects something from you that you don't want to give. And you know that you want to say something. You've probably already had some version of the conversation in your head several times. And in your head, you're incredibly good at the conversation, right? You're calm, you clear, you say exactly what you mean, you don't get pulled into an argument, you don't start crying halfway through, then become mad because you don't know what you're crying at, which somehow makes you want to cry more. But in your head, the conversation goes beautifully. But then you imagine actually saying something to her, right? And your body responds. Like maybe you're actually gearing up to say something, and then all of a sudden your chest is now tight, your stomach is dropping. You start thinking about all of the ways that the conversation could go wrong. You rehearse what you're going to say, you rewrite it to soften it. And then eventually, after all of this nonsense in your head, you decide that version might still sound harsh. So then you rewrite it anyway. And eventually you think, maybe I should just let it go. Maybe it's really not worth all of this extra effort. If someone asked what was happening in this moment, right, you might say, I don't know, I get really anxious about speaking to my mom. And that tells us something. We know what situation is bringing up anxiety. That's good. We need that. But we still don't know what you believe will happen if you speak up, right? Maybe you're afraid that she'll get angry. Maybe you're afraid that she'll cry and she'll make you feel guilty. Maybe you're afraid that she'll tell you that you're selfish and you're ungrateful. Maybe you're afraid that she'll misunderstand what you're trying to say. Maybe you're afraid that she'll pull away from you. Maybe you're afraid that the relationship will change if you stop being that version of you that she's used to, right? These are all very valid fears, but they are all very different fears. right? There's like a whole slew of different fears just in this one example. And each one helps us understand something that the word anxiety could never make us understand on its own. And this is what I mean when I talk about the fear underneath anxiety. I'm not saying that first you feel the emotion of fear and then a few seconds later, fear turns into anxiety. When I say fear, I am talking about the thing you were afraid will happen in that moment. The ending your mind is already predicting, the pain your system is trying to help you avoid, where something happens or you're imagining something happen and some part of you decides that there could be a threat here. And then your body responds to that threat. That response is what you may experience as anxiety. So we're starting to get to the correlation of fear and anxiety here, right? So what I'm starting to unpack for you is there is some sort of response here. There is some sort of fear response. There's this fear prediction that's happening. And then because of that prediction, you are then feeling anxiety. So notice how there's this cause and effect, right? You are feeling something, you're sensing something, you're imagining something, you're predicting something. And then because of all of that, you are now feeling anxiety. So that's sort of the mechanism that I want you to just kind of like keep in your mind as we continue to have this conversation. So going back to this example where, we're having the conversation with your mom in the moment, if I speak honestly, she may become upset with me and pull away. That's the fear. The tight chest, the racing thoughts, and the dread are the anxiety. And making yourself smaller, softening what you want to say, over explaining, or avoiding the conversation altogether is how you try to protect yourself from that fear. So the full pattern is not simply I feel anxious around my mom. The full pattern is when I think about speaking honestly to my mom, a part of me believes that honesty could cost me my connection with her, and my body responds to that loss, and then I feel the urge to stay quiet so that way I can prevent that. Right? So now we understand so much more. There's so much specificity here than just I'm anxious. And I know that sentence and explanation is way longer than just saying I'm anxious. So I'm not suggesting that you need to pull out a notepad and write a full case study every time you have a feeling. You don't need a bulletin board and like the red string and a team of detectives every time you have a sensation. But I do want you to notice how much more sense your response makes once you know what your system is trying to protect you from. Right? The specificity piece, there's so much importance in getting to the specificity if you're wanting to work with your anxiety and understanding your anxiety better. If your body believes that speaking honestly could cost you an important relationship, of course the conversation is going to feel so much bigger than a conversation. Of course you're going to feel anxious. Of course part of you is going to want to stay quiet. That doesn't mean that you have to stay quiet. It doesn't mean that your fear is right about what will happen, but your response is no longer random. You're no longer spiraling in this like, oh my gosh, why am I always anxious, right? Because now you have a deeper understanding. You have a reason why your system is reacting in this way. Right? Anxiety is a protective response. It is part of how your body lets you know that it believes something may be dangerous. And thank God we have that response. We want our bodies to alert us when something is wrong. We want to respond when a car is coming toward us. We want to notice when a situation feels unsafe. We want our bodies to help protect us. Anxiety itself is not the enemy. The problem is that our bodies do not only respond to things that could physically hurt us, they also respond to things we have learned could hurt us emotionally. And there's a lot of pattern detection and predictions based on what we experienced in the past, right? So not only is our body responding to potential physical threats, it's also responding to potential emotional threats, and then it's potentially responding to present threats, but then it's also potentially responding to previous threats from the past. So there's kind of a lot that could be happening under the surface. And so when we can understand each of these different mechanisms, it helps us to discern what's happening in the moment, right? And this is important because If you're feeling anxious because something is actually threatening in front of you, like I mentioned, the car coming at you, you want to know that that is a legitimate response, right? But it's almost like our anxiety cries wolf with us a little bit, right? We're having an anxious reaction off of something that's not actually threatening, like sending a text message, right? So we want to get ourselves back to a place where we can tune in to the sensations we're having and we can learn to understand what is trying to communicate with us. And then we can use discernment to decide, oh, yeah, this is actually a threat. I need to pay attention. Or no, this is something old and this is something I need to address subconsciously. And when I mention these things that feel threatening emotionally, I want to just give you some examples of what that could mean. Emotionally, feeling rejected can feel threatening to us. Being judged, making someone angry, losing someone's approval, being misunderstood, finding out that we were wrong, feeling embarrassed, not knowing what will happen next, a lot of uncertainty, right? Our bodies can respond to these possibilities as threats too. And sometimes that response matches what is happening. Sometimes it does, right? And sometimes a person really is unsafe. Sometimes a relationship really does punish honesty. Sometimes anxiety is bringing your attention to something that you need to look at. But other times, the level of danger your body feels does not match the moment you're actually in. Your mom might be disappointed, but you are not helpless, right? She might misunderstand you, but you are allowed to explain yourself or decide that you don't need to. She might have feelings about your boundary, but her feelings do not automatically mean that you have to do something or that you did something wrong. The conversation may be uncomfortable. It may even be painful, but uncomfortable and unsafe are not always the same thing. Your conscious mind may know that. You might logically be like, okay, I know I'm not unsafe here. You may already know that you're allowed to speak honestly. You may already know that you're an adult now. You may already know that your mom's reaction is not yours to control. You may have read all of the books and follow, 6 different therapists on Instagram. You may have a notes app with a full list of very healthy reminders about boundaries, but still, when the moment comes, your body says, absolutely not. We'll be keeping this to ourselves. And that gap between what you know and what you feel is often where the subconscious comes into the conversation about anxiety. Your subconscious mind learns from experience. It notices what has happened before and tries to help you prepare for it happening again. So maybe growing up, speaking up honestly did lead to arguments. Maybe your mom did become distant when you disappointed her. Maybe you learned that being easy or helpful or agreeable kept the relationship calm. Maybe no one directly told you that honesty was dangerous. You simply noticed that things went better when you kept certain thoughts to yourself. So your mind learns in these moments, and maybe your mind learned, if I want to stay connected, I need to be careful about what I say. That lesson can keep running even after your life has changed, even after you've grown up and you've matured and so many years have passed. It can keep running after you've grown up. It can keep running after you understand boundaries. It can keep running when the person in front of you is safer than the person you learned the pattern with. Right? This is when we start to get into, challenges in relationships where, what the relationship is presenting is not always indicative of, the reaction that you're having, right? We start to feel like, wait, I feel like I'm responding to something really old because my response isn't really warranted in what's, playing out in the present day, right? It can even keep running when you know exactly where the pattern came from. You can have language. You can know, oh, this is what happened and now it causes me to do this, but the pattern will still run, because knowing why you learned something does not always make your body stop expecting it. So you can sit there saying, I know I'm allowed to speak up, where there's another part of you saying, yeah, but what will it cost us? And that is the fear I want to find when we're looking at the relationship between fear and anxiety. Not because there is something wrong with you for having that thought or having that fear, not because we need to shame that part of you that learned it, and definitely not because every anxious moment needs to become some deep dive into your childhood. But I want to find it because we cannot help a fear that we cannot see. And that's really important because if we only know talking to my mom makes me anxious, then the main goal becomes getting rid of the anxiety, right? Maybe then you start working on taking a few deep breaths every time you talk to her. Maybe you'll go for a walk before you call her or after. Maybe you calm yourself down, and those things can help. Sometimes you do need your body to settle before you think clearly. There is a regulation process, but calming your anxiety does not automatically change what your system believes the conversation would cost you. You can calm down before the conversation and still avoid it. You can regulate your body and still change what you want to say in the moment. You can feel better for an hour and then have the same fear come back the next time you try to speak honestly to her. And that's because calming the response and changing the fear are two completely different things. One helps you feel safer in the moment, more regulated in the moment. The other looks at why the moment felt so threatening in the first place. And we need both. But first, we have to know what we're actually working with. This is why I'm anxious is only the beginning. It tells you that your system believes something is at risk, but the next question is, well, what am I afraid will happen then? Not what is wrong with me, not why am I still like this, not even how do I make this feeling go away as quickly as possible, just what am I afraid will happen. So if we go back to our example and you're thinking about speaking up to your mom, what are you afraid will happen if you do? And let the answer be simple. You don't need to come up with like the most wise and emotionally mature answer. I would recommend trying not to do that because usually when we're doing that, we're trying to like perform a level of emotional understanding. And that's the opposite of what we're doing here. What we're trying to do here is get really honest and tune inward and listen to ourselves, listen to what's under the surface. And so when we try to put like a therapist hat on and we try to think of like what they would say, we are still disconnected from ourselves. We're still tuning outward, but it's almost like an illusion. It's almost like dressed up in a costume thinking that we're actually tuning inward. So try not to make this like an emotionally mature answer. Just try to get honest. Try to be quiet, settle down, be quiet, tune inward, and ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen? Because usually the honest answer is something like, I'm afraid she'll be mad at me. Or I'm afraid she'll think I'm a bad daughter. Or I'm afraid she'll tell the rest of the family. Or I'm afraid that she'll make me feel guilty. I'm afraid that she won't understand. I'm afraid she won't like who I'm becoming. And the answer gives you somewhere to look. And whatever it is, but that answer gives you somewhere to look. It's almost like following the breadcrumbs, following the clues. It's a clue. It's almost like if we are looking at this as like a treasure map of trying to understand, the subconscious programming that is causing the anxiety, we use the clue in the moment to guide us back to try to find the treasure. And the treasure is the fear under the surface. So when we uncover what you're actually afraid of, that gives us something to work with, right? Now we have a fear. Now we have something tangible to actually look at instead of something super vague. And if you have a hard time finding the fear, I do want to acknowledge that it's not always so simple because some of this stuff wants to stay buried. So sometimes it can be a little bit challenging. So I want to give you a little, exercise to try. If you have a hard time finding the fear, notice what you feel the urge to do. Your protective impulse, that strong desire, that reactive desire gives you a clue. So is your impulse to not say anything at all? What do you believe staying quiet will prevent? Do you want to explain yourself for 20 minutes before you even say what you need? Are you hoping that all of the explaining will stop her from thinking something about you? What is that thing that you're trying to stop her from thinking? Do you want to make your boundary so soft that it barely exists? What reaction are you trying to prevent? Do you want to ask 3 other people whether you're being unreasonable before you trust yourself? What are you afraid might be true if, she doesn't agree with you or if those other people don't agree with you? The things we feel pulled to do when we're anxious are often attempts to stop the feared ending from happening. So we have a tendency of over-explaining to prevent ourselves from being misunderstood. We stay quiet to prevent conflict. We say yes to prevent disappointment. We ask for reassurance to prevent rejection. We try to control every detail so that way we won't be caught off guard. We avoid making the decision so that way we don't have to find out whether it was the wrong decision. So when the anxiety shows up, pay attention to your impulses and what your impulses are, trying to prevent you from doing or feeling or experiencing. And also try asking yourself these 3 questions. What just happened? What am I afraid will happen now? What do I feel like I need to do to stop that from happening? That's it. Find the moment, name the fear, and notice how you're trying to protect yourself. And please know that naming the fear does not mean the fear will disappear. You may say, I'm afraid my mom will think I'm selfish, and still feel anxious about the conversation. The goal is not to complete one sentence and become a completely different person by dinner time. The value is that your anxiety is no longer one big confusing thing that's happening to you. Now you can see the prediction inside of it. You can see what your body thinks it is protecting. And once you can see that, you now have choices that you didn't have access to before. Before, all you knew was, I feel anxious, so maybe I shouldn't do this, right? But now you can ask, is this fear pointing at something that's happening right now? Or is this something that I kind of learned growing up? Would her disappointment really mean that I'm doing something wrong? Can I let this be uncomfortable without treating it as unsafe? What would happen if I wanted to say something and I couldn't control her response? You may still be afraid, but now you are not only standing inside of the anxiety, you're also able to understand it, and you can hear what it is trying to tell you without automatically assuming that it's telling you not to do something. And this is where the subconscious work can become so useful and so helpful, because once we know the fear, we know what needs attention. We are no longer trying to work on anxiety as like this one big thing. We are looking at the belief underneath that says, if I'm honest, I'll lose connection. Or if someone is disappointed in me, then I've done something wrong. Or if I am misunderstood, then that means I'm not safe, right? Then we can help the subconscious part of you begin learning something new. And maybe that's, something like honesty doesn't have to mean disconnection. Maybe someone can have feelings about your choice without those feelings becoming your responsibility. Maybe it's being misunderstood is painful, but it does not take away your right to know what you meant. Maybe you can stay connected to yourself even when someone else does not agree with you. When that deeper belief starts to change on the subconscious level, the outside world can press that same button and no longer get the same response from you. Your mom may make the same comment. You may still know that the conversation could be uncomfortable, but your body no longer has to respond as if speaking honestly will cost you everything. You may feel less anxious. You may recover from it more quickly. You may still feel the fear, but no longer feel the need to obey the fear. And that is the relationship I want you to begin seeing between you, fear, and anxiety. Where something happens, a part of you predicts that something painful may happen next, your body responds with anxiety, and then you feel pulled to do something that may help you prevent that ending. And when we can work backwards through that pattern, we can find the fear your anxiety has been trying to protect you from. That is the deeper conversation I'm going to start having more here. It's also why I'm starting, surprise, surprise, a new segment on the podcast called Face Your Fears, where we're going to have a whole series of episodes and we're going to take one incredibly specific moment where you know what you want to do, but fear keeps getting in the way. Stuff like sending the text message to the person you like, or speaking honestly to a parent, or posting the video that, you keep saving into your drafts, or walking into an event where you don't know anyone. And we're going to look at what makes that moment feel so threatening to you. And then I'm going to guide you through a visualization that helps you meet the moment differently so we can start tapping in to those beliefs that live in the subconscious mind, because there is a decent chance that you already know that you're allowed to send the text. You probably already know that you're allowed to have an opinion, or you already know that, one person judging your video won't be the end of your life. The issue isn't that you need more information or that you need more self-awareness. The issue is that a deeper part of you is still expecting an old ending. And instead of only talking to the logical part of you in this series, these visualizations are going to give that deeper part of you another experience. We're going to be tapping into the subconscious. So that series is coming soon, next week. And so I wanted to give you this little preamble to help you understand the relationship between fear and anxiety, so you can understand why we're going to start getting deeper into conversations around fear. And then another super fun surprise is I've been building something that is going to help you use this process when anxiety is actually happening in the moment. It's going to help you find the moment. It's going to help you name the specific fear, and it's going to help you meet the fear so that you can get back to your life instead of losing the rest of your day inside of that moment of anxiety. So I'll be sharing more on that soon. But for now, I do want to leave you with a little exercise to help you through this week. The next time you hear yourself saying, I'm anxious, and there is like a period at the end of that sentence, don't tell yourself that you shouldn't be anxious. Don't rush to fix the anxiety. Don't make that moment feel like there's something wrong with you. Let I'm anxious be the beginning of the sentence, okay? I'm anxious, and what I'm afraid will happen is, and then let yourself answer honestly. Maybe it's, I'm afraid she'll be mad at me, or I'm afraid I'll look stupid, or I'm afraid that they'll say no. I'm afraid I'll disappoint them. I'm afraid I'll try and it's not going to work. You don't have to solve the fear. We're not working on solving the fear right away. We're starting by seeing the fear, by changing your relationship with the anxious moment and what you do with that moment. We are creating an intentional pause in the moment and asking you to do a little detective work of what's under the surface by tapping into the fear, tapping into what you're afraid of in that moment. And this helps you build your relationship with yourself, because you are no longer looking externally, right? You're actually taking it one step deeper by tuning inward, connecting inward with yourself, tapping into your sensations, your thoughts in that moment, and getting honest with yourself about, what you're fearful of, what might happen in that moment. So we are starting by seeing it, because I'm anxious tells you that your system believes something is at risk in that moment. And what am I afraid will happen helps you understand what your system believes is at risk. And once you know that, you have something specific to work with. You have something specific to meet. You can understand why that response is here. You can begin working with that part of you that learned that response. You can decide that if the ending your fear is predicting gets to decide what you do next. That's the part of the conversation that I'm so excited to continue to work towards and continue to see, to help you see how it plays out, because this is a pivotal moment in stopping yourself from unconsciously replaying old patterns or creating your reality based on your past. This is such a pivotal moment in aligned living and intentional living, because this moment right here, this moment where you have the anxious moment, you decide, oh my gosh, I'm just anxious, I'm not going to do the thing. That moment is where you are making a decision whether to recreate your past or create a new reality for yourself. And so we'll get into that conversation way deeper, because there's so much I want to talk about there, but I want you to understand the importance of this moment, catching these moments and understanding them, understanding what's going on under the surface and meeting that fear so we can kind of dissolve that fear subconsciously, that is the work. That is the first part of the work. It's pretty much all of the subconscious work. That's what I do with my clients over and over and over again, is we're catching moments, we're understanding them, and we are dissolving those things through subconscious reprogramming. So yeah, that's it for today. This week, just pay attention to the moments when you say, I'm anxious, and you put a period at the end of that sentence. And instead of ending the thought there, see what happens when you finish the sentence. I'm anxious and I'm afraid that blank. That is where I want us to begin. This conversation is to be continued. We are going to keep unpacking. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast and the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I will see you in next week's episode.